Awesome day that we had in Clendon last weekend. To all of you who came and helped make that a reality, I'm so very, very grateful. It was awesome. I mentioned a few weeks ago that over December and January, I spent a lot of time talking to God about Papster, about his continued vision for us this year. And I really believe that he spoke the word forward into our community for such a time as this. The definition of forward is this: strongly inclined, ready, moving ahead so as to make progress toward a successful conclusion. We don't have to have it all figured out to move forward. We just need to take the next step. It was Danish philosopher and theologian Søren Kierkegaard that said, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. And with these words in mind, shortly after Norman told our team that he was leaving, we got together and we decided to look back to help us better understand what moving forward looks like. And God was really present that day, and he showed us some stuff in a really powerful way. We decided to look back over the past 30 to 35 years, pretty much the period of time that this building has been here in Puanui Road. We wanted to have a look at the vision and mission and values of each team from that point in time. And we started with John and Lynn Den. They led Papster for 13 years. We spoke about their audacious goal to be a church for the unchurched. They were risk takers. They loved people. They created community and they instilled a culture of grace and excellence and production. And they began the journey of the minefield of building this complex. After John and Lynn, Brendan and his team led here for 10 years. When Brendan arrived, he was so incredibly young, but he was so very smart and brave and humble. His team saw us adopt the 5 purposes. They unified us and they changed our thinking from behaving, believing, belonging to belonging, believing, then behaving. They empowered our young people and they began a contemporary evening program called Friday Night Live. They were all about grace and growth. Then Stephen and Leanne led the team after Brendan for 6 years, and they strengthened and they built on the legacies before them. They challenged our traditional thinking, and we became a church that values every single one of us as a minister. Relational evangelism, inductive Bible discussion, life groups, international mission, and a loving picture of God. We became even more seeker-friendly and even more intentional. And then Norman led us these last 6 years. And the vision and the values that we introduced are the ones that we continue to carry today. Inclusive community, staunch following, dynamic change, compelling creativity, mind-blowing generosity, selfless service, and holistic living. Our mission: to restore and reconcile by sharing our story and hearing God's story, and all of it wrapped up in the living out of Isaiah 58, our catch cry, our banner, the foundation, the heart, the core of all we do. And as we wrote this up on the whiteboard that day, we began to see the journey, the picture, the legacy unfold. And we were overwhelmed and awed at God once again, a God who had so unmistakably gone before, a God who had led through each time period, each era, unable to move forward without the team, the legacy that had been built before, strengthening foundations, layering, adding, and growing. A God who can take a gathering of people that are so vastly different to each other in so many ways and unite them in mission and vision and love and purpose. And what that does is then continues to grow his kingdom in this place. Not tomorrow, but today. In order to understand what is behind us, we need to continue to move forward. Life only goes in one direction, forward. Everything else in its static state is dying or already dead. Muscles atrophy unless they are used or working. Engines seize unless they are running consistently. Is the choice between moving forward or standing still literally the choice between life or death? Isaiah 58 is God's instruction, and it's his challenge to his people, to his church. That's us. And he begins in Isaiah 58 by calling us out. He says, don't play church. Don't pretend. Don't pretend by looking a certain way or behaving a certain way on Sabbath when you turn around and you act differently during the week with your family, at your work, or at your school. He says they ask me to take action on their behalf, pretending that they want to be near me. He says, do you think this is the kind of fast day I'm after? A day to show off humility? A day to put on a pious long face and parade around solemnly in black? And then he says what he does want. He says, I want you to break the chains of injustice. Get rid of exploitation in the workplace. Cancel debts, free the oppressed, remove the chains that bind people. What I'm interested in seeing you do is share your food with the hungry, give shelter to the homeless, clothe those who need it, and be available to your own families. He says if you get rid of unfair practices, if you quit blaming victims, if you quit gossiping about other people's sins, if you are generous with the hungry, and if you help those in trouble, then, if you do these things, then the lights will turn on. And your lives will turn around at once. Your righteousness, your right doing, the things that I ask you to do, the feeding the hungry, removing the chains, giving shelter, when you do these things, I will lead you forward. And the glory of the Lord will protect you from behind. He says, then when you call, the Lord will answer, I am here. And your light will shine out from the darkness, and the darkness around you will be as bright as noon. I will always show you where to go. I will give you a full life in the emptiest of places. I love that line. I'll give you a full life in the emptiest of places. Firm muscles, strong bones, giving you water when you're dry and restoring your strength. You will use the old rubble of past lives to build anew. You will rebuild the foundations from out of your past, and you will be known as those who can fix anything. Restore old ruins, rebuild and renovate, make the community livable again. When we are the kind of church, Papster, that God calls us to be, when we put others ahead of ourselves, when we lean on Him, when we rely on Him, when we call on Him, when we are led by Him, then He will lead us forward. And we won't be alone in it. He will be with us. He will go ahead of us and pave the way. He will protect us from behind. Forward is our only option, and not tomorrow, but today. When thinking more about this idea of forward, and with planning the message, I thought I want to illustrate by using a story from the Bible, and I thought, you know, what one will I use? And I went and I started at the beginning in Genesis. And there was just example after example after example. You know, in Genesis, it starts with a guy named Joseph. He chose to take small steps forward. No matter what life threw at him, no matter what he was accused of or how low his rank, he kept moving forward into what God called him to. And because of his faithfulness, he became a ruler in the land of his enemies. Then in Exodus, we meet Moses, and he frees the Israelites from the Egyptians, and they arrive trapped in the wilderness. There are mountains on both sides. The Egyptians are chasing from behind, and there is a sea in front of them. But Moses chooses to trust God, and he moves forward into that sea. And what does God do? God parts that sea for them and defeats their enemy. We then meet Joshua. Joshua marches forward around the city of Jericho 7 times until God defeats their enemy. We meet Ruth. Ruth moves forward with her mother-in-law into an unknown land. And Nehemiah moves forward to rebuild walls even though his life is at risk. We meet Esther, who moves forward into the palace even though she is terrified. And because she does, her people are saved. We see David, a small boy, move into an arena to face Goliath. And Daniel, like Joseph, faithfully steps forward one step at a time until the enemy come to see and know his God. We see Hosea faithfully stay and move forward in relationship with Gomer. And then in the Gospels, we see the disciples move forward out of their comfort zone against what popular culture and tradition has taught them. And they instead decide to follow the one who will change their lives. We see Peter move forward to build the church, and Paul move forward to send and mentor and build and grow the church. This book is full of amazing stories. We should read it more. I don't know how all this works exactly, but what I do know is this. When we move forward with God, He moves. He acts. When we move forward, God does what God does best. He performs miracles. He goes before and paves the way. He is strength and courage and peace in the middle of it. And then He is behind us, guiding and protecting and paving the way for those still to come. Not tomorrow, but today. You know, we've been on a journey with ICANN 58 since 2013. And in those 5 years, I have seen us move forward little bit by little bit into our community. We have been making connections and building relationships, and I have seen us move forward outside of these walls, outside of our comfort zones, and in moving forward, we have seen God live and breathe and perform and propel us even more into the unknown. As we've moved, I have also seen the powers of darkness. I have seen the powers of darkness try to block, dismantle, unravel, and shut us down. And it seems like the more we move forward, the more the devil works against us. And this year was no exception. Just 11 days out, we were told that there had been a change in the management at the centre down at the Clendon Shopping Centre, and all events, booked or not, were cancelled. We had just confirmed in December, and we were all on track. But 11 days out, we are told there is absolutely no way that we will run our event. Our giving was collected. Our orders had been placed, our stage truck was paid for. The police and their barbecue were on board. Our speakers, dancers, bands and singers were geared up and practicing. 3,000 flyers were printed, 100 posters were up in that community, and our venue was cancelling. The day that we found out, I met with Carl
And we just sat in his office and we just speechless, looking at each other, shrugging our shoulders, unsure how to proceed. And we decided that Carl would work on an email to the manager, and I would send out the war cry to our cluster team and to our team here at Papster, asking them to start praying. Because what we did know is that from our 2017 ICANN, that when we do what God calls us to do, He is right there alongside us. Now, I've got to tell you, an email contact was all we had. In person, they had just turned us down that very day, and they wouldn't give us a phone number. And I just thought to myself, they're just going to ignore the email. Well, we did that email, and we sent it at 12:59 p.m. And the reply came through at 1:09 p.m., exactly 10 minutes later. I was still sitting with Carl when the reply came in. And when you get an answer in 10 minutes, you're not expecting it to be any different to the one that you've already been given. But not only was it different, it was more than we ever could have imagined. First of all, it was an absolute yes, but it was so much more. You see, we had always battled for space at the shopping centre. It's the busiest shopping day of the week, and so car parks are at a premium. But in her reply, she said, "I'm assuming that you need the central car park area to be closed off for your event. We can offer you that at no charge. And we can also offer you help with getting Māori and Pacific wardens for security at your event." Yeah. And we just sat there again, speechless, shaking our heads at the greatness of our God. And it really felt like the devil said, "I will stop you." And then it really felt like our God stepped forward and said, "Let me show you what I can do." Yeah? It reminded me of a spoken word that Sarah wrote for our very first ICANN 58 back in 2013. And I've asked Sarah to share that with us again today. I really believe, Sarah wrote this when she was 15 years old, 15, 16 years old. It's funny, hey, God's been using women to prophesy over our church for a long, long time. And I really believe that He used this young woman to do the same. Sarah, come and share.
There once was a place I called a community, filled with criminals, underdogs, and outcasts. But in this list was not the last. It was a fast expansion in which the blessed met the broken, the insecure and the outspoken, the audible and the deaf, the spiritually alive, the spiritually dead. And they loved each other with actions because words were unnecessary. They not only wanted but needed this love so bad, but believed it to be a gift only we could have. So we built walls with wide doors which selected just who would be entered, but more so accepted into the stained glass community we renamed a church. It looked majestic and beautiful. It looked right in the center of the city, staring down it stood, looking but dividing, and those refusing to enter multiplying, and this brick wall climbing until it reached the clouds that we needed a rope just to get in. So the church installed alarm systems to feel safe from the outside. But the thought of safety from within was an illusion, a mirage, a delusion we created inside the church, claiming that we were already saved. These walls, these bricks that were designed to keep us safe, have only put us deeper into this comfortable hole, slipping steeper into this castle we claim as only our home. And although it may be hard to see, this idea brings up the possibility that this could be the most dangerous place you could be. in which love becomes conditional and selfish, forgetting the love that we had before, or simply choosing to ignore the fact that love is selfless. And that's what I believe the problem to be, refusing to realize or just refusing to see how much time we spent weaving nets but refuse to get wet. We don't practice but only preach. If we claim that the community is so important, why aren't we out there now? So what if we stopped spending our money on security cameras, alarms, and locks and spent it instead on building concrete blocks to hold the doors open right through the night? Because it was in the dark that we need the light. What if we removed the desks from the offices and filled them with beds just to rest the heads of the spiritually dead? And what if we tore down these walls? And not with a wrecking ball, but with our minds. When we're no longer blind, then perhaps we will be able to find this agape love we speak so fondly of. Our journey may begin from within the church, but we can only move forward by going to the community. There was once a place I called a church, filled with criminals, underdogs, and outcasts. But in this list was not the last. It was a fast expansion in which the blessed met the broken, the insecure and the outspoken, the audible and the deaf, the spiritually alive and the spiritually dead. And they loved each other with actions because words were unnecessary. And they chose to give this love away, but it remained no matter how much they gave. And so this church we renamed a community to show this radical idea that the community needs the church. But much more importantly, the church needs the community.
Abraham Maslow, an American psychologist who is best known for creating Maslow's hierarchy of needs, said, "In any given moment, we have two options: to step forward into growth or to step back into safety." In our series Reframed, we have seen the awesomeness of God in creation. We got to see just how magnificent and creative and mighty He is, but in that grandeur, we also got to see a God who is deeply personal, a God who sees us, who sees our hurts and our fears and still loves us, a God who sees us and creates connection and opportunities for us to see Him. Then Carl introduced to us a God who pursues us, a God that sees our faults and evil and mess and still chooses us, still chases after us. Then Stephen showed us that Jesus' life here on earth was the very embodiment, the complete revelation of all God ever said. Jesus is what God says. And then last week with ICANN 58, well, without God, last week would never have even happened. Last week we got to see all that we have learned. We got to see a God who awes, a God who is deeply personal, a God who is strong and chasing after us. We got to see the embodiment of God lived out through us, not tomorrow, but today. You know, I've spoken today about those who have led this church over the last 30 odd years. But what made such an impact in each era, what built a legacy, was not the leader, but the army that God grew around them. Church, what creates momentum and energy and drive is when we come together, when we put our differences aside and we move forward at the call of the one that we serve, at the call of the one who loves us for all our faults, the one who saves us, the one who makes a difference in our everyday lives. Jess wrote a spoken word for ICANN 58 last week, and in it was this line: "When a person stands up, it's a moment. But when a group stands up, it's a movement." When we work together with God, we become a movement, an army, an unstoppable force. Not tomorrow, but today. I saw it last week in Clendon, and I see it here in this place every week. Men and women stepping outside their comfort zones and moving forward with God, sometimes into the unknown or the scary or the downright ugly, but moving forward anyway. And because of that, lives change. Not tomorrow, but today. I see you. I see you arrive early to welcome people. I see you sit at tech desks, making our worship experience more memorable and inspiring. I see you lead life groups and create community even though it scares you. I see you lead classes in the shed to create community. I see you teach kickboxing and lead Bible discussions in Clendon. I see Robin and Peter arrive at Clendon last week early in the morning to set up a space where they can pray for people, create an environment of light in a dark place. I see Maxine and Apu and Nina and Chris, who just got baptised today, and Karyn spend the whole day in the heat on the barbecue feeding people. I see Jess Williams and Nick turn up and pack parcels all day. I see Jason and Crystal and Marie come and take food parcels back to their neighbours. And I see one of our teen girls' life group chat to and paint the faces of dozens and dozens of little people, even though it was scaring most of them half to death. I see you. I see you make a difference, but more importantly, God sees you. Not tomorrow, but today. Church, this makes a real difference. And the stories of the impact that we made last week are continuing to come in, but I want to share just one of them with you today. Apu and his team were doing such a good job on the barbecue that their lines were insanely long. So long, in fact, that the people were actually forced back into the Papster stall where our team was sharing what we offer and what we have going on. This one particular lady started chatting to Trina about CAP. She told Trina that both she and her sister-in-law had actually been through a CAP debt centre, and they were both now debt-free. But they'd both had very different experiences. She said that she had been at a debt centre where the managers had come and gone, and even though it worked for her, she hadn't felt a great deal of support. She then told Trina about her sister-in-law and how the centre that she had gone to had a whole church that wrapped around her and loved her and walked the journey with her for 2.5 years and through huge adversity. And as she shared, Trina realised that the sister-in-law she spoke of had come and joined CAP through our Papster Centre. It was Bridget and her Sabbath morning group who have bought groceries, baked cakes, provided transport and love and care and support for years. And Trina let this lady know that when her son had had a terrible motor accident a year ago, we had been praying, we had been visiting, we had been supporting. And the woman immediately left her details so she could connect in with us, like her sister-in-law had. What if we would reframe our thinking from one of drive and ambition and stuff and what we want to love and service and community to others and what He wants? Because when we do that, church, we will see that there was once a place I called a church, filled with criminals, underdogs, and outcasts, but in this list was not the last. It was a fast expansion in which the blessed met the broken, the insecure, and the outspoken, the audible and the deaf, those alive, those dead, and they loved each other with actions, because words were unnecessary. And they chose to give this love away, but it still remained, no matter how much they gave. And so this church we renamed a community, to show that as much as we fall, we choose to stand back up. As constantly as we lose, we choose to gain. And as deep as we sink, we choose to rise again. Not tomorrow, but today. It was Martin Luther King Jr. that said, not tomorrow, but today. He says, we are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. This is no time for apathy or complacency. This is a time for vigorous and positive action. Be the change you wish to see in the world. Stand up for others when they are being mistreated. Don't be the person that waits until somebody else does something about inequalities. Be the somebody that stands up while everybody else is waiting. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever we do, church, we have to keep moving forward. Our speed doesn't matter. Forward is forward. We're not going back. We're moving ahead. We're here to declare that our past is over. In Him, in you, God, all things are made new. And we surrender our lives to you, not tomorrow, but today. It will take us as a church to move forward. But this body, this family, this thing we call church is made up of us, individuals. It's made up of you and me, and it will be friendly and inclusive if I am. Did you get that? This place will be friendly and inclusive if I am. Say, if I am. It will do a great work if I serve. It will make generous gifts if I am generous. And it will bring people to Jesus if I journey with them. You know, it will be a church of loyalty, hope, faith, and love if I am filled with these things. So this morning it begs the questions, am I being all that I want this church to be? Am I moving forward? Because I will turn into we, and we can be an army papster. Our speed doesn't matter. Forward is forward. Let's pray. God, you make all things new. And today we declare that we will follow you forward. Not tomorrow, God, but today. And God, we pray that you would make us more inclusive, more inviting, more generous, more surrendered, more kind, more loving. May we not play church, God, but may we be church. And may we put you at the center of everything that we do. God, we ask for the courage to step forward into all that you call us to. God, give us a full life in the emptiest of places. Build out of the old rubble of our lives. Restore, rebuild, and renovate through us, God. And may we be a community that instead of tearing each other down, we would love each other with actions, because words would then be unnecessary. Today, God, we choose to stand up and move forward with you. Not tomorrow, God, but today. Amen.